Now it's time for the Voice for the Industry podcast.
Well, all right, Chris, I got to tell you, I'm really excited about the episode with Taylor Olson. It was such a great episode. We split it into two.
Yes, it was really good, but long. So we have two great episodes.
Well, it's pretty long. I mean, he started two pioneering businesses in the industry, and it was really good discussion. He was very open and talked about how, his work as a missionary kind of led him into being an entrepreneur. And I just thought it was just a really good conversation. So today is episode one, whatever you want to call it, of our Taylor Olson interview. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's great. You get some insight on Slingshot, how he sold it, and also about them going remote right before COVID. So it's pretty interesting.
That's a good story. All right. Well, nobody wants to hear us. Let's get started. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the Voice for the Industry podcast. I'm very excited today. Our guest is Taylor Olson. I've known Taylor for a long time, and I'm really excited to talk to him and have him share some of his experiences and his vision for the future, right? Welcome, Taylor. Great to have you.
Thank you, Raymond. Great to be here.
All right. Well, I'm going to start with the bio. Always a good place to start. Taylor Olson is a dynamic entrepreneur with a track record of turning innovative ideas into thriving companies. As the CEO and co-founder of Applause, he's on a mission to revolutionize employee engagement through real-time incentives in recognition that drive performance, retention, and customer satisfaction. Before Applause, Taylor was the founder and CEO of Slingshot Technology, leading the company to national recognition. With a law degree from UCLA and a business degree from BYU, Taylor brings sharp insight and bold vision to everything he does. Welcome, Taylor. Good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Raymond.
So I do have a question. You have a law degree, but you never actually became a lawyer, right?
Yeah, that's true.
That's interesting because, my boss, Tom, who you know, he has a master's in engineering. He never became an engineer.
No kidding. So, I remember that from Tom.
Yeah.
We shared that. I always have a bond with people that go through the pain of grad school and then don't get to use it for their career because you can't help but looking back and think, I learned a lot. I don't necessarily regret it, but boy, that was a lot of time and money to not have it impact my career directly.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it impacted it, right? But yeah, I hit my microphone. But yeah, I get the point. But anyway, it's so great to have you here. I'm excited to talk about a lot of cool things.
Yeah.
And I think we just start at the beginning. Maybe we skip the bedwetting years and the acne trauma years and just go right to.
I'd love to get into those years because I did make the all-star team in my baseball rec league when I was 10 years old.
What position did you play?
I have a 10-year-old now, and I'm reminding of that occasionally. Sometimes I'll pass my little grades out to my kids of when I was their age, and I was like, "Hey, you got to beat me, be better than me, and we'll put a prize and a reward up there, but." Let's have you do better than little 10-year-old Taylor.
Yeah. Incentives and competition are really important.
Totally,
right?
totally. But
so
yes, we could skip those years.
Well, what position did you play though?
I played catcher. So and I remember I wasn't frankly that good at first. I got better as the season went. It was the first year I'd played catcher. One of my first two games, all these balls are getting past me. And at one point, I remember the umpire behind me, I'd missed a ball. It must have hit him in the leg. And he sort of just leaned over and said, "Kid, if you miss one more of those balls, I'm going to punch you in the face." And I was like,
Really?
Ah.
Wow. Did that work? Did you catch him?
Yeah. We got a little bit better. So anyway, so we don't need to go into baseball. I was just teasing with that.
I know. But catching's tough on the legs. So I couldn't do it. I tried it. But anyway, all right. So I'd like to kind of start at the beginning. I mean, we were going to get into Slingshot and Applause, but kind of you start where you start. It's your tale to tell, sir.
Yeah. So I guess when I look back, I think, up until I was 20 years old, 21, the pivotal thing that I felt like had just a huge impact on my life was I was raised LDS or Mormon, and there's a 2-year proselyting mission that generally you're encouraged to do. I'd sort of drag my feet. I think most of the kids were going out around 19. I eventually decided to do it around 2021. And that was a game changer for me because I was dinking around in high school. I graduated with a 1.2 GPA. I was pretty shy. I just like I felt an ambition and a strong desire, as I assume most teenagers do, of like, I want to make something of my life. I want to have a good life. I want to make an impact, but I didn't know how to. I didn't know what to do. I needed structure and discipline. And I feel like going on that proselyting experience, I went up to Canada. I was in Winnipeg, which for those that don't know is just above Michigan. It's one of the coldest cities on the planet that has over 500,000 people, consistently -40 throughout the winters. And we largely just knocked on doors all day, talking to people about the religion. And it gave me a work ethic, a discipline. It helped me understand how to lead, how to sacrifice, how to care about people, how to set goals, achieve goals. I sort of came into it being like a fairly shy, not so sure what to do sort of kid. And I came out of it feeling like I could do anything. And I took that experience and then, went into college.
Yeah, it sounds almost like some people go into the military, kind of the same way, right?
I think it's very similar.
Yeah, and they come out. Yeah, and I actually spent 4.5 hours on a flight from somewhere on the East Coast to Salt Lake City years ago, and I sat next to, I know the young men are called elders. Sister, is the young lady called a sister?
I think so. I mean,
so.
It's been a minute.
It's been a while,
I think
but anyway, it was fascinating. She told me the whole process and how you're not supposed to like ever kind of be apart, like for safety. You always kind of have to keep each other, in line of vision or not, close by. And it was just a fascinating thing. She told me the whole process, and so I could see that. I could see how it could shape a lot of people. And there's a lot of super sharp people coming out of that whole Utah region. It's pretty amazing.
It really is the foundation of I think a lot of the business climate and culture of Utah, that like companies in Utah, they're not like, they know how to be scrappy, because your discretionary income, at least when I was out there in 2005, was $150 a month. And we had housing and transportation paid for, but $150 for food, for groceries, for laundry, for any discretionary. I mean, you're pinching pennies. And so I think there's like a prudence and just sort of like, there's a mentality of we can do a lot with a little, that gets into the business climate. And then I think like certainly companies generally that come out of Salt Lake and Utah, they're not afraid to sell. Like you see really good SDR teams, you see sort of some of the aggression at trade shows, and they just can just sell, and they'll take 100 no's to get to the one yes. And it's frankly,
and it doesn't faze them.
Oh, it's nothing. I mean, because the religious experience is so much harder. Yeah. That like selling door to door for pest control or selling software to other businesses is just, it's emotionally way less taxing.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's amazing. So you finished your missionary work, and you came back home, and then kind of what started the next step?
Yeah, I had it in my head from like, there was a time that my parents had separated when I was around 10, and my aunt lived a block away, and I started to stay at their house after school. So my aunt was sort of looking after us for a little bit after school. She's a lovely person that had 6 kids of her own and then let another 3 in the home. She's just incredible. And she would play old Perry Mason. She liked Perry Mason and she liked Matlock, if I remember correctly. And those were just on in the house. And I was fascinated by it as a kid. I would sit there and watch it with her. And I started to feel like I want to be an attorney. I want to be a trial attorney. And that was my plan my whole life. And so when I got home, I felt like, okay, let me go get my undergrad degree. And then I'm going to do everything I can to get into the best law school I can. And then I'm going to use that to become the best trial attorney I can. And what I discovered when I started to get into college was that your undergrad degree could be anything. There's no requirement. And so I just decided, I'll just study what I think is the most fun. And I thought the business would be the most fun. And so I was sort of looking up good business schools for undergrad. And at the time, this was 2007, BYU was the 5th ranked undergrad business program in the nation. And I'd never considered going to BYU.
But it was relatively close, right?
Yeah, it was half an hour away, but I grew up at the foothills of University of Utah, and I liked their teams, and BYU was just never dawned on me that I would want to go there. But when I saw that and I started to just look into it, I felt like, well, there you go. It's right here. It's 30 minutes away. I'm going to go to this undergrad business school, and I'm going to study business and entrepreneurship. And remember, I graduated high school with a 1.2 GPA, so I wasn't getting into BYU. So I had to
You didn't have any offers.
No.
You weren't checking the mailbox every day.
It was sort of like, I was like, I need to just go to a community college. So I went to Salt Lake Community College. I went to the guidance counselor and said, hey, I want to go to BYU's business school. And she said, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we've ever had a Salt Lake Community College student that has left here and gone there. You need to basically get a 4.0 all 4 years or all 2 years.
Wow.
And so I was like, well, I'm going to try. And, I ended up making it. I ended up getting in. And then I studied business. They had an entrepreneurship track. And I freaking loved it, man. I loved studying there. I loved going to school there because people were so friendly and ambitious. And I was doing something that I was interested in. And it was entrepreneurship, and it was fun. And I started several businesses in college. None of them really worked out, because I was so busy studying for the LSAT and I couldn't really give it my all. But looking back, it was like, gosh, the passion was there. Right. And my favorite class was you could sign up for a 1-credit lecture series. There'd usually be 150, 200 students, and they would just pull in an entrepreneur from the community that had been successful. They'd share their story. And I signed up for that class 3 or 4 times. I just kept taking it. And these entrepreneurs would stand up and share their story. And the overwhelming feeling that I would get from the lecture series was like, these people aren't as mystical and so far above and beyond the rest of us that what they're doing is unattainable. It felt in reach. And so I was always inspired by them, but it didn't change my plan. My plan was to go to law school. So then I ended up deciding to go to UCLA, and and I went to law school. And I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking here, so you stop me when you interject.
That's nobody wants to hear me. I have nothing. I have nothing that anybody's interested in. Trust me.
We all know that's not true, but thank you for letting me go. So then I get to law school, and I was, I think, 27, and a year in, I was sort of understanding what an attorney does all day. And what the job is, and what it mainly is for any attorney is researching and writing. Right. That is 90 to 95% of your day. And as I did it, I didn't love it. And I had this moment where I remember sitting in my apartment, and I was sick. I had the flu, and I was just sitting around for a week. And I remember, it had taken me a full year to get to this point, but I remember sitting there and finally kind of admitting to myself that I don't want to do this. I don't like it. I don't want to be an attorney. And it was one of those moments where it was sort of like a panic, a shock, a disappointment, because I'd spent so much time and money preparing for it. I studied for the LSAT for 2 years.
Oh my gosh.
And everything I was doing in school was always centered towards get the best grades so I can get into it just was so disappointing to come to that realization. And it was scary because I had already accumulated a lot of debt, and I didn't feel like I had a good way to pay it off without being an attorney. And so, long story short, in that moment, I decided, well, The only other thing I've ever been interested is entrepreneurship.
Business,
Maybe I should try and make a career out of that. I have already started a number of companies in school at BYU, and granted, none of them worked, but I do know how to get a company off the ground while in school. I'm going to start a company, and I'm going to try and get it off the ground, and be able to produce some income before I graduate. And if I can pull that off, I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And if I can't, I'm just going to have to go practice law to pay this debt off.
It's funny. A lot of people, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have had the self-realization or the determination to change, right? Like you're already there, you've got the debt, and you realize, maybe this attorney thing isn't what I thought. But I don't think a lot of people would be able to, be honest enough with themselves and to make that transition. And that's why you find a lot of people that do jobs they don't really like. They end up in careers they really don't care for. I thought maybe it was when you realized that as an attorney, you're not going to get up there and just like on Matlock and Perry Mason, they're going to confess, because that never happens.
You figure that out. Yep, that's all dramatized.
Wait a minute, I'm not going to have this great courtroom drama every time I have a case.
It doesn't work that way. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I think you're 100% right. I read a little article from someone that did hospice end of life care. And she said, hey, here's the 5 things that I hear the most often from people as they're dying. And one of those 5 things was, I regret that I didn't go do with my life what I actually really wanted to do. I never even tried. And it was usually because I had an income need that I just sort of had to fulfill with a job I didn't like, or I was afraid and I didn't think I could do it, or frankly, I was maybe just too lazy, or it was like my family and friends wouldn't have approved of that thing. But never, for whatever reason, a deep regret that they never even tried. And I wanted to at least try,
Right. Well, that's awesome. So then you decided to start a business. Now, was Slingshot the first thing you tried out the gate, or did you try some other stuff first?
I was trying a few things at once. One of them was we were going to do a mobile notary service in LA, which sounds silly, but until you live in LA and you experience the traffic, you realize that anything that can be mobile for a busy professional so they don't have to travel, that there's a premium that would be paid for that. And so we actually got our notary licenses, if I remember correctly, me and my co-founder, Chris, and we were thinking about doing that. I had a friend that did lending, auto lending, and we were starting to work on potentially a lending business. And then there was what became Slingshot, which was we were starting to do marketing on behalf of a few pest control companies. So it was sort of trying a few things, see if anything could emerge as a winner. And it felt like what became Slingshot, we called it alchemy marketing at first. It felt like that had the most legs. So then we dropped the other 2 and focused on that one.
Yeah. I remember your co-founder, Chris. I spent a lot of time with him over the years, but he told me the story that he was at a pest control company's office. He was helping them, doing some working, and somebody took a call and they were trying to sell him, and they said, oh, and apparently the person said, well, I need to talk to my wife. And they said, okay, and hung up. And he was like, wait a minute. I can help these people sell more. Right. So I always remembered that, but it's like, so I was like, okay, you guys, because of the experience with the missionary work, and, like you said, it's a lot easier to talk to somebody about buying pest control than go out in negative 40-degree weather and try to convince them to, convert their religion. Right.
Totally. Yeah. And Chris and we had sold pest control, door to door a year or two to pay our way through school. We both went to BYU. So it was a summer job that gave us a little bit of insight into the industry, helped us understand sort of how to sell it and talk about it. And I think the real key insight when we were doing the marketing was we would generate leads, they would come in, and a lot of them were coming in after hours, or they were coming in when we were on, responding to a different one or something. And we just sort of started to realize, like, wait a minute, these leads, they're coming in weekend after hours. And as we follow up with the company, a lot of times they didn't get in touch with the lead. Right. And so we started to understand that if someone had an urgent pest control problem, they weren't going to just sit around till the next day and wait for someone to call them back.
Right.
Like it was a perishable thing. And so the more we understood that, the more we started to believe that maybe what would be a better solution that would really help your average pest control company would be an around-the-clock sales team that could take a lot of the existing leads that were dying on the vine and respond immediately and complete the sell. And I'll never forget that as we transitioned to that, the response that we started to get from owners, it was less of like, oh, okay, maybe, yeah, I see what you're saying, I'll think about it. And it was a lot of, wait, you could do that? Like, how much? Okay, yeah, let's try it. It was just a very different reaction than we had been getting with the marketing. And so we changed everything to that. And it started with me and Chris taking all the calls ourselves 24/7. And to Chris's credit, I was still finishing my last year of law school, and Chris would sleep at the office. And there would be 3 calls that we weren't big. So he would just sleep, and then the phone would wake him up, and he would, gather his senses, and he would answer it. And it was enough to just get the business off the ground, and it grew from there.
That's fantastic. So I remember my first exposure was at the MPMA Pest Tech Conference in San Jose, California. I think that was 9-10 years ago. I'm bad with tracking. And there was just like 6 vendors out in the hallway, and everybody just had like a little table. And my now boss was there representing Voice for Pet.
Yep.
And I would walk by, and this kind of, swole now, I guess the term is swole. This buff guy goes, "Hey man, you want a free drone?" And I'm like, "Sure, I'll take a free drone." And he goes, and they had a little drone there, and he said, "We have to enter to win." And I'm like, "No, wait a minute, you offered me a free drone." And so he told me about what it was. So I said, "Well, if I sign up with you guys, I get a free drone, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And it's in my garage. He did send me a drone. I had to remind him. But anyway,
nice.
That's when I first heard of you. And I know that Bill Welsh from Rose, I think, had some earlier interaction. But to me, is that kind of when you people started to know who you were, like about that time frame?
I think what started was we had just talked to folks that we knew sort of locally out the gate and started to build up some customers. And then we were pinching pennies, and we were down to, I think, our last $10,000 that we had. And we were growing, but we weren't growing at a pace that was indicating like this could be a large, successful business. So we were a little bit unsure still. And someone had told us that they have these things called trade shows or expos where people gather and you can exhibit. And I'd never even heard of that before. And so we heard of Pest World, and we just on a whim decided like, hey, let's spend our last $5 to $10,000. Let's get a booth and go out and see what happens. And that was a big moment for us because we just sat at that booth all day, shared what we had created with the broader pest control community, and it was very well received.
Yeah.
I remember meeting Bill Welsh there, and I remember meeting a lot of folks, and that really kickstarted it. And I think for that point, there were still tough years ahead, but it was always from a growth standpoint up and to the right. We were always growing and always building, and so that was it.
Yeah, no, I remember my reaction was very similar. Like, wow, you can do that? I mean, that's perfect, right? And it worked out really well. So one thing I do want to talk about, because now after COVID, of course, a lot of companies are remote, but what we're seeing is that trend is starting to reverse, right? A lot of very large companies, I think Amazon and many other companies now are starting to require employees to come back, either hybrid situation, but you guys were remote long before everybody else had to be remote. So because talk about that and how that the decision and how that was allowed you to expand, and just however how did that remote part of the business come about, and what did it cause to happen?
Totally. So I think if you go back to 2014, my reaction to remote was similar to most business owners of like, no, I can't keep an eye on people. I can't build culture, camaraderie, brainstorming, teamwork. not into it, but what I had a little sort of a little bird in my ear the whole time, because one of our initial advisors who became an investor, her name was Carla Miney. She had built the first remote call center ever. And she did it back in like 2001.
Wow.
I mean, if you can imagine like how the technology even worked, but she found a way, and she built a really successful call center called Occurrence. And so she told me from the beginning, like, hey, Taylor, like folks are just as successful in their call center role remote. You can recruit more. They'll stay around longer. Yeah. There's really no reason not to do it. You should try it. And so I didn't try it. But then eventually, as we were growing, we started to run into recruiting bottlenecks, and we could not get enough people in the door. And so one of our solutions was let's try it. That will allow us to recruit out of anywhere. It worked pretty much instantly. Yeah. And then we just slowly started to expand it to where pretty much the entire call center was working remote. And part of the reason why it worked for us was in a call center environment, when you have a good phone system and you have good management and data and reports, you know everything they're up to. There's no mystery of when they're working or their call times or their CSAT scores, or like, you know, all of it in real time. And so it's very easy to manage folks remotely. And so it really worked for us. And then so the way we had thought about it was like, okay, great, call center, remote. And then the other side of the business, we had started to build software. So engineers, designers, finance, HR, leadership, sales, that's all in office. You know, we weren't interested in remote for that. But then, you know, we had an engineer that like had to commute an hour in, and something had changed where he was going to have to leave. And we said, well, we'll let this one engineer be remote. And then he worked
just
out.
One.
Just one.
Yeah,
then,
no more.
And then we had one of our leaders that was moving states, and we didn't want to lose him. So we'll let this one other leader be remote. Yeah. And that worked okay. And then we had hired a COO that had come from Oracle. And during the interview process, like, I loved him. He was amazing. He said, by the way, my Oracle team, I have an org of 800 people, and this is one of the most successful technology companies in the world. He said, the whole thing's remote. I work out of my home, and I'm not going to go into the office. So, like, can you do remote? And I thought, yeah, I think we probably could just do the whole thing remote. So then 2020 in January, he came on. We had this huge office that had a $300,000 lease to it. And we thought, let's transition the whole company to be remote, every role, and let's sublease our office, and let's get all that done by February. And we did. And 2 weeks later, COVID hit.
Yeah, Rudy something Gobert, happened in March of 2020. Yeah.
He coughed on the microphone, and the NBA shut down, and it became very clear that the world was going to change. And so we were locked and loaded and ready to go, and it didn't impact our operations at all. And then the other thing that I'd add that it hadn't dawned on me at the time, but how sometimes you age and you just sort of look at your past a little differently. It's like, I'm 40 now, and when I look back, I remembered, like, wait a minute, I grew up remember how I mentioned that my parents they split up when I was 10?
Yep.
My mom had been a stay-at-home mom, and we were really close, and then she went back to work, and I missed her. I liked her there when I got home from school.
Right.
And I remember around the age of 14, I want to say, she got a job that allowed her to work out of the home. And suddenly my mom was there again. And it just felt like things got back to the way that I liked it. And the house was clean, and there was cookies there when I got home from school. And the home just felt more warm. And, and then about a year later, she launched her own business, and it was a fully remote work from home business. And this is back in the 90s.
Wow.
And she had 10 employees, and it was a coupon magazine that had local discounts for companies that would get mailed out.
Paper
And
mint.
she provided a good lifestyle for us. And like looking back, it was like, like this whole remote thing for my mom made it so that for me as her son, a kid, everything got better. Like we had more money, like she was there, the home was better, and I was experiencing the benefits of doing remote the right way at a young age. And maybe that was planting a seed, which I didn't realize at the time. But now here we are with Applause, and I'm 100%. I mean, I am so into remote that it confuses me when other technology companies aren't willing to do it. But I also am sort of at a spot where I understand that it's not for everyone. Some people are better in the office, but for Applause, we put a flag up and said we're 100% remote.
Yeah, we similar story in reverse. So our company is a small part of a big company, and so we had like a little piece of this back of the building, and we didn't have enough room. So again, this is in New Jersey, where I was remote, because I'm like, I'm not moving from Florida to New Jersey. Sorry. Nothing against New Jersey. But so we had a few remote employees, but everybody else was in the office. So we went and built out the back, put in bathrooms and new office space, and like expanded and everything else. And about 2 weeks later, COVID hit. Boom. Right. And we're still remote. I mean, there's nobody in our office. There's one person that goes in 3 or 4 days a week. There's a couple people there. I think we have one tech manager in there a day. But yeah, kind of similar that we had this whole build out is done. And, and to go back to your other point, like, earlier with people like, well, I got to make sure I can keep an eye on them. I kind of feel like, and I've been to a few different businesses and offices, that you actually pay less attention to people that are right there with you. I mean, you really, and I hear that from a lot of people. Oh, I'm not worried about them. They're right over there. I can hear them. And I'm like, no, you can't. And you're not listening to them. Right. So to your point, with the technology and the ability to a phone system to be able to see like everything they're doing, I think it's actually it's easier, and you get better management if you're managing that way, instead of just looking over the top of a cubicle and go, yep, Taylor's here.
Oh, totally. And it's a forcing function that, like, when you're all in a room, you can look at someone and say, well, they look like they're busy, which is great. And when you're remote, you can't do that. And so it forces you to say, well, what are the specific outcomes that show that this person is winning in their role and for the company? And it forces you to think about it that way. And then you sort of manage to outcomes that are good for the business, and you don't worry as much if they appear to be busy at the time, because some people can either be really busy often or look like they're busy, but yet not really get success and outcomes. And so I think it's healthy for that reason. I also think what happened during COVID was, it is true that some people are not better at home. Like, they are better in an office, and that's just their personality, or maybe they don't have a good space at home, or there's tons of distractions, or whatever it is. And COVID forced all those people to go work at home. And so then you had this huge amount of people that maybe weren't as productive or happy at home. And that created a swell of potentially data that tech companies were looking at and saying, hey, this isn't working. We now need to pull everyone back into the office. And my insight and belief has been, just own who you are and what you think about it. And if you're going to be a remote company like Applause, put a flag down, tell everyone that, and then recruit to it. Like, when you're recruiting, make sure this is the personality and someone that has sort of demonstrated that they are not only just as productive and happy at home, but they're actually more productive and happy at home. And then if you have an entire company that is sort of built that way, it 100% works.
Right. Yeah. No. We have an employee that it turned out that it was better for that employee to be in the office 3 days a week. Yeah. I mean, we realized that was, and they agreed after it was like, okay, you need to come back in for 3 days a week, because, like you said, distractions and they're running errands and so you're absolutely right. But so I mean, it makes a lot of sense. But if you're going to be remote, then that's your company, and hire people that are going to be successful as remote employees. Because to your point, not all of them are. It's pretty exciting. No, I just think that's an amazing story. All right, so So, as many people probably know, Slingshot did actually keep going up and to the right,
Yeah.
and grew and grew and grew, and then you ultimately sold Slingshot to Workwave.
Yep.
Now, what year did you sell Slingshot?
That was in 2021. We sold on April 30th. That's when like the final deal was consummated, and that also is my birthday. And so it was a very memorable birthday. What had happened is as 2020 hit, like the home became a more important place for everyone because everyone's working out of it. I think initially within home services, it was sort of like, what does this mean? What's an essential service? What's not? If you remember all that stuff.
I do. Yeah.
And I think for our company Slingshot, we had a lot of our customers that immediately were like, hey, we need to pause. We don't know what's going on. And so there was a moment of a month or two when I remember laying in bed at night thinking, we've been building this thing for 6-7 years. It might go under. Yeah. It was a really stressful time for everyone. And then it turned. And then as we started to see our customers get even more business because they serviced homes that everyone was in, we got more calls and they needed more help from us. Our business continued to grow. And then what happened in the background of that is, if you remember, the stock market surged, technology companies started to get really big valuations. There was a flood of money into the market based on sort of the COVID and PPP stuff. And then there was zero interest rates. And when you have zero interest rates and tons of money, like a lot of stable investments are less attractive and people want to put the money to work and stuff that's maybe a little bit more speculative or high risk, which can be PE or VC. And so just the whole thing made it so technology companies were worth more and that there was a lot of money to be spent. And so that's why we saw, all the SPACs and companies going public. And I don't know the data on it, but I would imagine towards 2020 and 2021, there was more technology-related transactions and sales than at any 18-month period ever. And so we were just a part of that larger backdrop where we were getting a lot of inbound requests. Like we weren't thinking of selling the business. That wasn't on our mind at all. And we just started to get a lot of people reaching out. And as that happened, I felt like, well, like maybe we should at least listen. Right. And then as we started to get into conversations, some of them were larger strategic software companies. Obviously, ultimately, Workwave was the one that bought it, and some were private equity. And, some of the numbers that they were sharing were higher than I would have thought. And the company, was worth a decent amount. And, we're 7-8 years in, and Chris, me, the founders, we basically had been paying ourselves $30,000 a year.
He told me
we were living off of nothing.
Yeah, he told me that.
It was now, mid 30s. And I had started dating my wife, Kara. It was looking like we were probably going to get married. I had wanted, I'd been thinking earlier that maybe I could slow down, spend more time with family and my parents and catch up. And it started to feel like maybe it made sense. And so then, we went through a process, talked to tons, ended up selling it in April.
All right. Okay. Well, that's great. Yeah. I remember when I heard about it and I thought that was pretty exciting. So, and I also was told that, and I think I want to make sure people know this to your credit. When you sold Slingshot, I don't know what you call it, a sprinkle, whatever, you made sure that all the employees got some benefit from that sale, right? I think it was based on, seniority, tenure, things like that. But I think that speaks volumes about a business owner, about you as a human being, because not all business owners appreciate the value that the employees bring to the business. Right?
So true. That was one of the best parts. It was, I ended up at the 11th hour, unbeknownst to me, I was designated to be what's called the seller's agent. And that's a role where you represent all the equity holders and stockholders, and the sale proceeds go to a bank account. The seller agent has responsibility to wire it out to every single person on the cap table and document it, make sure it's accurate. And at the 11th hour, that I realized that was me. And so then I'm sending out all the funds to mainly employees. And doing that and then calling them and letting them know and hearing just how it was going to impact their life, it was so awesome, and they deserved it, because we had a lot of employees that really sacrificed and really cared and acted like little founders and owners, and they put their heart into it, and they really deserved it. And so one of the things we did was, you have vesting schedules where employees sort of earn their stock allotment over time. And with what hasn't vested, generally when a company's acquired, the leftover vesting sort of gets rolled in some way to the new entity, and they can continue to try and earn it.
Right.
We decided, for the most part, to just accelerate everyone's vesting and pay them out on everything. And
Wow.
that would be a way for them to get just a bigger financial win for their lives during the transaction. And it was incredibly rewarding. Yeah.
I can't imagine. I can kind of taking my kid to the ice cream man, ice cream truck.
Yeah, totally.
Don't tell them, right? No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. That's amazing. And I wanted to make sure that we talked about that. So kudos to you. That's a fantastic thing. Thank you for joining us.
See you next time.